What makes a community turn on itself so completely that even the old rules of cruelty no longer apply? It's a question that lingers in the background of many historical tragedies, but in the case of the Guangxi Massacre, it sits right at the center. You read the numbers, you see the dates, and still, the scale of it all feels unreal. Almost too grotesque for the human mind to process. It happened. Men who once farmed side by side suddenly became enemies. Teenagers, barely old enough to understand politics, swung machetes with zeal. And in a 6-week window of 1968, the violence twisted into something so primal that even hardened researchers pause when trying to describe it. The Cultural Revolution touched every corner of China, but Guangxi became a kind of dark mirror, a place where ideology merged with old resentment, hunger for power, and, frankly, something far darker that had been simmering beneath the surface. To understand how Guangxi descended into this chaos, you kind of need to take a few steps back and see how the ground was slowly prepared for what came next. The road to collapse. By the mid-1960s, Mao's authority wasn't what it used to be. The Great Leap Forward had collapsed into famine. Millions died. Within party circles, whispers grew. Doubt spread. And Mao, never one to tolerate dissent, launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966 to purge those he saw as ideological threats. He called on China's youth, telling them to sweep away old ideas and crush hidden class enemies. Red Guards formed everywhere. Students became inquisitors. Teachers, landlords, intellectuals, they were dragged from homes and beaten in the streets. Guangxi, already rural and economically fragile, absorbed these tensions like dry grass soaks gasoline. By 1967, when the Cultural Revolution surged through the region, political turf wars were already simmering. Local leaders who had ruled their counties for decades found their authority challenged. The region's longtime strongman, Wei Guqing, held control since 1954. His rivals waited years for their opening, and suddenly Mao's call for struggle gave them a chance. The factions that soon emerged weren't just ideological groups. They were personal alliances, clan networks, old feuds wearing revolutionary slogans like cheap masks. Wei led what became known as the Big Faction. His rival Wu Qingnan led the Small Faction. At first, it was small skirmishes. A beating here, a kidnapped official there. But the spread of weapons into the region changed everything. The Small Faction, desperate to stay relevant, reportedly hijacked armed shipments meant for the Vietnam War. That act alone nearly guaranteed their destruction. When Mao signaled favor toward the Big Faction, the balance tipped overnight. Guangxi became a battlefield with no front line, only neighborhoods loyal to one side or the other. And that's when the killing began in earnest. Violence without restraint. Guangxi wasn't a region where the police could intervene. By early 1968, the police had been ordered to stand down nationwide. Almost every local militia pledged loyalty to one faction or the other. In Wushuan County, January 1968 marked the true start of the slaughter. People were dragged from their homes, tied with wire, and marched through the streets as counter-revolutionaries. Some were executed right away, others beaten slowly to death by mobs. Then came April 1968. A new revolutionary committee formed, supposedly to unify the region. But the key positions were held by Wei's loyalists. The Small Faction was doomed. May 1968 broke what little restraint remained. Coordinated attacks hit every Small Faction stronghold. Some fled into the hills. Most didn't make it that far. And over the next 6 weeks, something horrifying happened. Something that went beyond power struggles, beyond ideology. Cannibalism began. Yes, cannibalism. Not forced by famine. Not driven by starvation. It was a display, a ritual, a grotesque performance of loyalty. The weeks of cannibalism. The details are hard to read, and honestly, even harder to write. But they're documented in official investigations carried out in the 1980s and in the work of Chinese dissident researcher Zheng Yi in his book, The Scarlet Memorial. These investigations recorded 64 cannibalism victims. 56 had their hearts and livers removed. 18 were completely consumed. 13 had their genitals eaten. 1 was decapitated. And unbelievably, 7 were reportedly consumed while still alive. Locals described how some organs were believed to have medicinal value, especially the heart and liver. Consuming the organs of an enemy of the people supposedly granted strength, virility, longevity. No one truly believed the science. Belief wasn't the point. The act itself, the willingness to swallow a piece of the defeated, was what mattered. A test of loyalty, as party officials later admitted. That loyalty extended even to children. Around 70 students, still teenagers, murdered and consumed their teacher. Witnesses from Wuxuan recalled how leading party members watched, nodding approvingly, as the students took turns chewing. And there was symbolism at play too. The dismemberment, the carving, the refusal to let the dead be buried whole. It echoed ancient Chinese punishments like Ling Chi. Confucian tradition held the integrity of the body as sacred. The Cultural Revolution tried to invert everything, so destroying that integrity became a twisted form of ideological purity. One particularly harrowing moment involved a local leader named Jianan. His execution was turned into a spectacle. His pregnant wife was forced to stand before the mob as they held up pieces of him and asked, "Is this your husband's thigh? Is this your husband's head?" Witnesses say she fainted before they finished. Collective guilt and the machinery of fear. Cannibalism wasn't constant across the whole region. It lasted only 6 weeks, but the terror it generated outlived the acts themselves. One reason it spread was something chillingly practical: shared guilt. If everyone participated, even symbolically, then no one could report the others later. In Binyang County, officials forced each household to send one representative to take part, a way to bind the entire community in complicity, a way to guarantee silence. Interestingly, out of the 64 officially documented cannibalism victims, only 1 was a woman. Male flesh was believed to offer strength, while female flesh was seen as useless, even polluting. The single exception involved a teacher who murdered and ate one of his young female students for medicinal reasons. Even the other cannibals thought he was mad. And not all violence was ideological. The chaos became a perfect cover for settling old scores. In one case described in the government investigation, 2 branches of the same leaf family, the plum tree branch and the pear tree branch, used the political climate to annihilate each other. Women of the pear branch were sexually assaulted. Men were rounded up, executed, dissected. Their livers and genitals were taken. Their remains dumped in a river. Their property stolen. It wasn't ideology. It wasn't Maoism. It was revenge wearing a red armband. Youth and brutality. One detail that appears repeatedly in survivor testimony is the role of the young. Teenagers, many just 15 or 16, became some of the most enthusiastic killers. Part fear, part indoctrination, part misguided zeal. The Cultural Revolution weaponized youth like few movements in history. One 18-year-old woman became infamous for mutilating her male victims, particularly severing genitals. Her brutality earned her the position of deputy head of a county revolutionary council. Stories like hers helped cement the idea that even the young could climb in status through violence alone. The end of the butchery. By late 1968, Mao changed course. He ordered the Red Guards to stop the violence and instead go to the countryside to learn from the peasants through labor. With this shift, the revolutionary fever cooled. Many Red Guards were dispersed. Guangxi, exhausted and blood-soaked, slowly returned to a grim normal. Official reports estimate around 100,000 deaths in the region. Some scholars place the number closer to 200,000. Approximate figures, but the scale remains staggering. And while cannibalism was most documented in Guangxi, there are reports, though far less detailed, of similar acts in southern and western Hunan. Without official investigations, the details remain murky. Still, in Guangxi, the combination of political chaos, local feuds, rural poverty, and the Cultural Revolution's moral absolutism created something uniquely horrifying.